to think about the problem. It is my pleasure now to introduce Emily Frye, who is Director of Cyber Integration at MITRE Corporation. For those who you may be not that familiar with MITRE, MITRE is a federally funded research organization. It is a nonprofit organization that the government funds, where the private sector and government collaborate to come up solutions to some really, really hard problems. So I'm really happy to have Emily here with us today, as we talked so much about public sector collaboration and a new model. So with that, Emily, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Clara. I'm so glad to be here and to have a few minutes to share with you some of my thoughts and MITRE's thoughts about what it means to live in the world we live in today. I'd like to start with a question. Everybody have one of these kinds of things? Can you hold it up? You know, Bruce Schneier said yesterday, this is not a telephone. This is a computer. It happens to make phone calls. So if it's not a telephone, but it is a computer, is this a cyber device? Or is this a physical thing? Or given that it knows who I am because it uses my fingerprint, is it somehow a human thing? I'm here today to talk to you about the convergence of cyber, physical, and human. I was asked to talk a little bit about how do you protect critical infrastructure. And really what it comes down to is looking at risk in a very different way from how we have been accustomed to looking at risk in the past. I've been working in cybersecurity since the President's Commission in the US on Critical Infrastructure Protection came out with its first report in 1996. And at that time, we were in the early stages of having conversations about how to manage the risks associated with cyberspace. To show you how far we've come, I want to share a short story. I have a wonderful colleague. His name is Rob Simmons. And Rob is one of those people who brings perspective to life. So he always shares his stories about modifying his house and building access for his wife, and his most recent story was about buying a washing machine and a dryer. And so Rob tells me on a Monday morning after a weekend of shopping, I can't find a laundry machine that doesn't connect to the internet. Do we all need laundry machines that connect to the internet? I don't. Maybe you do, but I really don't. And I don't need a refrigerator that connects to the internet. And I don't have a Nest. I don't have a home management system that I control through my phone. These are choices that you can make, but we are slowly losing our ability to choose what is connected and what is not connected. So given that that's the reality in which we're all swimming, let's talk a little bit about how we look at risk. The earliest forms of cybersecurity risk analysis all revolved around this CIA discussion. And we still use these terms, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, as being essential to how we look at risk for cyber operations. So when you have a network that runs some sort of IT system within your company, you do want to know, do I value confidentiality and have I built it to provide that? Do I value integrity and have I built it to provide that? And how much availability do I really need? And have I ensured that this system will provide that? Those, in fact, are very important still today in a world where cyber, physical, and human have come together. So, however important they are, what we are going to find is that they're not enough. So I want to encourage us today to look at things in a slightly broader way through a holistic risk management lens that moves beyond CIA into a framing that we might think of as CIASR. So what's S and R? There are a couple of conferences in the United States that are really fun to go to because people come there in order to share how to hack all kinds of things that people want to say are not hackable. We have yet to find a not hackable thing or system. DEF CON and Black Hat are two of the leading conferences that the big hacker communities meet at in order to highlight their newest exploits. And what we have begun to see in the past 5 years is an increasing number of demonstrations of prowess in hacking things that actually affect the human body. I mentioned this a little bit yesterday. I think there may be a tipping point in our willingness to really reframe how we look at this legally and from a regulatory perspective when we think about things that we can see impacting the human body. And the example I used then was the discovery of the hackability of embedded medical systems, which we began to uncover at DEF CON and Black Hat in 2015. Another example is Jeep hacks. Jeep hacks for the CAN bus systems of cars began to show up in 2015 as well at Black Hat. And we've also begun to see attacks on things that we call smart cities, where you're building capabilities around transportation networks, and parking meters, in order to make your city operations more streamlined and efficient. There's a tremendous appeal to making your city operations more streamlined and efficient, isn't there? You save taxpayer money, you're faster, you're more efficient. What's the hidden underbelly of smart cities? Do we even know? So let's assume that all you've done is demonstrated the ability to hack parking meters. The ability to hack parking meters doesn't seem like a public safety risk. It just seems like a trivial, almost script kiddie thing to do. But what if the system that you've hacked into that manages those parking meters is actually managed by a central city hub that has systems that manage ingress and egress, emergency dispatch, evacuation routes, traffic lights? We're beginning to cross into an area where the difference between an apparently marginal and irrelevant system when it comes to public safety actually crosses over into the realm where humans and animals that we live with are harmed. So SNR, CIASNR. S means safety. In a cyber-physical human converged world, we now must assess safety risks as well as confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And we also must assess reliability. So the R stands for reliability. CIASR. When you think about the reliability of the 911 system or emergency dispatch system, which has different names in every country, you've got to be able to rely on it, or it's no good. If your emergency dispatch system is compromised, because it's now computer-enabled and the computers were hacked, you have a reliability problem. So how do you get people to hospitals during an emergency, as well as during ordinary time? If we live in a cyber-physical human converged world, and we do, and we therefore must assess risk in a more holistic way, CIASR, how then do we go about doing this? I'd like to close with a story and sort of a moral of the story by telling you about a gentleman that I met a couple summers ago. We were in the northeast region of the United States. We'd been developing a bunch of capabilities around how do you do regional cyber risk management. So we were up there in the northeast piloting one of these approaches. Had a bunch of people from the medical community, a bunch of people from the energy community, academic community, other communities. And the guy that really caught my attention that day was a man from a large oil and natural gas pipeline company. And he had an interesting title that at the time I had not seen. It was the chief of risk management for this company, and he was at the level of the C-suite, wasn't an officer at some lower level. And I asked him, how are you going about doing this? How are you looking at cyber risks? And he said, you know, when I first came into this company, I saw bits of risk management everywhere. I had people who managed IT systems, but they didn't think about risk. I had a chief security officer, but he didn't think about cyber. I had a guy who looked at risk for the corporate operations, but he was really thinking about finances. And he said to me, I broke it. I was hired to manage risk for this company, and so I broke it all. I thought that's rather bold. And I reassembled it in order to cross-cut cyber, physical, human, financial, IT, anyone that I could see had a stake in the actual purpose of this company needs to be on my risk team. And ultimately, he's right. When you think about holistic risk management, what we've got to be able to do is pare it down to the core functions. We're not going to be able to make everything resilient. We're not going to be able to protect everything. We're going to have to choose where to focus. What is the essential purpose of my business? What is the essential purpose of my government organization? And in the event of duress, how have I planned to ensure that I continue to deliver that function through that duress? Anyway, so the moral of the story is, in a CIASR world, focus in on the essential functions, and they're going to cross-cut cyber, physical, and human. It's the best hope we have for getting through the next decade. Thank you.
Thank you.